I'd like to show you how to archive files from within Final Cut Pro 10 using Archiware's P5 Archive and their accompanying application called P5 Archive app. The P5 Archive app allows you to archive and restore files from within the Finder by right-clicking on them. So we can select a Final Cut Pro 10 library or a tree of files, including libraries or even PDF files, whatever you want. Select it and choose Archive to P5, and that would trigger an archive process that has been there before. The new feature, though, is archiving files from within Final Cut Pro 10, which has been published last week, and it already supports the new Final Cut Pro 10 version 10.3. So how do we do that? If I select a library within Final Cut 10, I have the option to modify my storage location settings. I click Modify Settings, and then I can choose to store my motion content inside the library, which means custom motion templates will be copied into my library, which makes archiving much easier in case you use custom templates. So once we've done that, we can already locate our library inside the file system. I stored it in my movies folder. There's a folder called FCP10, and there I have my 10.3 archive demo bundle, which is 2.5 gigabyte in size. If I go back to the Final Cut Pro 10 application, I can select my clips inside the library and add some metadata, for example, a reel number, a scene number, a take, the camera name, an editor, which is my name, and the location where I recorded the footage, and so on. What is very important in this case is that I select the correct metadata view. A metadata view is a collection of metadata fields that Final Cut 10 knows of. In this case, I choose Extended because that's the metadata view that the P5 Archive app will always use when it migrates metadata to the P5 Archive later on. So at least for export, you need to make sure that all the metadata fields that you're using inside your metadata views are contained by the extended metadata view. You can edit your metadata view by opening this panel, and you can select single single fields to make them part of the export. So in this case, I deselected some of them, selected some others, but that's more or less a random choice. Let's just confirm that we are happy with this kind of selection. And once we've done that we entered metadata for all kinds of files, we go back to the project file probably, and then we go to the share destination selection and we click on P5 Archive app. The P5 Archive app sits in my applications folder. It's a normal app that you can download from the Archiware page, but we are looking at the details in the accompanying article to that video. So that opens the Final Cut Pro 10 export window, where you can enter some information, like it takes the name of the clip and some other things automatically. You can customize it if you want. There's also a settings panel, but we don't need it with the P5 Archive app because that mainly affects the format and the content of the exported rendered timeline in a way, but we're not exporting the timeline in this case because what we're up to is to archive the existing library including all its content, and that doesn't include exporting something new. So we click on Next. That opens the P5 Archive app. As you see in the dock, it jumps up and down, and then it sends some XML to the P5 Archive app, gives us an information that the share has been successful, and then it will reopen the P5 Archive app or bring it to the front, and soon we will see that the P5 Archive app starts a new job. It initializes it, and then it copies data over into the archive. The archive can be a tape-based archive, which is great if you're storing large amounts of data, like video data, of course. And then you will have the option to store hundreds of terabytes of data if your tape library is large enough, or if you're willing to take out tapes and replace them with empty tapes once you've written to them. If we look at it, it was a 2.5 gigabyte library, and now it's down to 167 kilobytes, so it doesn't take much space anymore. It has a new icon to show you that it has been archived. And basically this includes only preview files now, or just hints to preview files, but we're looking at this later. If we go back to Final Cut 10, it will tell us that all the files are missing. Yes, because they are not there anymore. They are on tape or on disk or wherever you stored them. Let's go to the P5 archive web view and log into it. So this is a web interface which shows us what P5 archive has in its database and on tape. P5 comes with multiple modules for backup of laptops, a synchronized module, but mainly with an archive for us. We go to the restore section, go to the archive data, and there I have a database called P5AA, which is the short form for P5 archive app, and I just use that for my P5 archive. And there we navigate through this file system, which looks exactly the same like the original file system. And there you see the 10.3 archive demo FCP bundle. If I click on that, you will see that it holds some folders inside. Though in the file system it looks like a file, it's a bundle, a folder with content inside. But the Finder just displays it as a file. So if I go into the original media folder, you see a lot of previews and my files. And if I select one of them, you see it starts playing a movie, and which is a full-length preview. So I can go back to the end of the file, and it shows some metadata. If I double-click on that, it will again play a video. It takes a second. Sorry, quite busy my machine. And I can also go through the whole metadata stuff. So you see it holds some metadata that I entered, like the creator, a title, and some keywords. Okay, I haven't entered keywords, but there's some metadata it took over. I mean, it takes over all metadata, of course, that you entered, but there's just not much contained inside, which is already great that you can find this metadata, but they are only really useful if you're able to search for it. So there comes P5 archive comes with the search function, so I can look for all the fields that are set up. And let's say, for example, I have a real number, and we say it starts with 1, for example, and then it finds my file because it's real number 1. You can also combine multiple searches, that you have a real and a name, and it can contain words or strings and things like that. So there's a lot of options that you have, and if you identify your content, you can add it to a restore selection, which is like a shopping basket. And if you have all the files that you're interested in, you go to restore to, select a location in the file system somewhere, which is basically a navigation like in the Finder, and then you hit so then you hit restore or next in this case, and it will restore the data. You don't necessarily need that web interface. It's very valuable if you want to identify single files by using your metadata that you entered within Final Cut. But there's another option, of course. Let's say you have like a very, how should I say it? If you know your file system very well and you're structured very well, you might already know where you find your files. And then you can simply go to the folder where you know your library resides and restore the whole library from within the file system. You can also open the content of a library and navigate through its content. And if you look at it, you can also double click on a file, which will show a little preview including metadata inside the Archiware app. So you see all the metadata that we've seen in the P5 archive web view will also displayed here, and that holds a little button to play your video preview in the browser, like this one. Okay, so you can identify your content from within the Finder and restore single files if you like. But I think the great thing about it is not so much searching for single files within your file system, but to restore a whole library. So if you just click on restore, you will see that the 300 kilobyte archived version will be restored to a much larger file, which can then be used on this machine or any other machine. So if you take these archive files, put them on another machine or on a central file system, any other machine can restore that file and work with that, which is a great thing, I would say. If you look at the size of this restored file now, it's just like 236 megabyte, and if you open it in Final Cut, it will get rid of the missing file information, because now it's the complete library. Why is it so much smaller than before? Because it was 2.5 gigabytes before. There's an option called delete generated library files, which basically deletes render files, optimized media, and proxy media. This is something that the P5 Archive app does automatically by default, and it also only restores the things that have not been deleted before. So there's an option called Archive Temporary Files Generated by FCP10. That means it doesn't clean up the library before it archives the files, but takes all the temporary files with it into the archive. This is great if you have a very large project with large proxies, which takes a long time to regenerate, and then you can just leave it like it is. In all other cases, Final Cut would simply recreate all these things whenever it needs it, like proxy files, video files, and so on. So if I close Final Cut, reopen my application later on, or my library, and the application, then Final Cut will detect that it should have proxy files and optimized media, and then it will start regenerating them on the fly, which in this case doesn't take much time, but for a larger project that can take a bit. So in a second we will see that it starts rendering. You see it just started, and that will increase the size of the library in a bit. That's basically it. I think it's a very powerful and easy way to archive files. It's just a click from within Final Cut, and it's just a click in the Finder to restore it. And you can either search for metadata inside Final Cut and restore complete libraries from there, or single files, or you just locate your things in the file system because you know how it's structured, and then restore whatever you need. That started working with Final Cut Pro 10.4, and it already works with the latest version of Final Cut, which as of today is version 10.3. Thanks for your time, and I hope you like it.